Hereby a logical Aglaea guide of the most important aspects of her kit, so you don't forget how she works ever again. So what is the most important thing we want to do with Aglaea? That is to cast her joint attack. And how do we cast this joint attack? When we have her enhanced basic attack available. And why do we want to cast this joint attack? Because it does a lot of damage. That is the main way Aglaea deals damage. But how do we get this enhanced basic attack to begin with? So that we can click on it and cast this cool joint attack of Aglaea and the Memo Sprite. Well, the enhanced basic attack becomes available when you use Aglaea's ult. As simple as that. But also, this joint attack is quite special, since as the name says, it is a joint attack. So that means that it counts as her doll attack, but it also counts as Aglaea doing an attack. So why is this important for us? Well, as you might have guessed, it procs Robin's ultimate twice, so that additional damage Robin's ult does, sure, but also it helps us in defeating some specific enemies faster. So for example, these new enemies of the Pure Fiction all have these stacks, as you can see right here. And we want to reduce these stacks to 0, since when we reduce it, the character that reduced it to 0 gets some energy and the enemies take some big damage. And since we know, oh, so Aglaea's attack counts as doing 2 attacks, it always reduces the stacks of these enemies by 2. So defeating these enemies is quite easier now. And there are also some other enemies who benefit from being attacked a lot of times. But since we have this Pure Fiction available now, I was like, it's a nice example. So okay, now we know. We want to cast Aglaea's ult, so we have her enhanced basic attack available. So we can cast that joint attack, which does a lot of damage and counts as doing 2 attacks. But there's also one other thing we want to do with Aglaea's whole kit, and that is that we want to gain speed stacks. And those speed stacks are only gainable when you have the Memo Sprite on the field, since those are the Memo Sprite stacks. And how do you gain these stacks then? Well, that is whenever a doll attacks an enemy, okay? So then we get +1 speed stack, and every stack gives Memo Sprite a lot of stacks. And when you use Aglaea's ult, then Aglaea herself will also gain speed depending on how many stacks you had. But there is one condition that must be met to get this stack to begin with, and that is that the enemy should be marked with this thing right here. Since if the enemy is not marked with this thing right here, then the attack of the doll won't generate a stack. And only one enemy can have this mark at that time, and that should be the elite or boss enemy, of course. Since if your attack enemy was this stack, they also do some additional lightning damage. Always nice to have. So alright, we know. We want to apply this thing to enemies. And how is it called? The name is called Seam Stitch. How do I apply this Seam Stitch thing on enemies? That is by 1, when Aglaea attacks an enemy. Then an enemy is marked. That will be the main way you apply these stacks on enemies. But there's also another way, and that is when you cast Aglaea's technique before battle, when you hit an enemy. But this technique will just mark a random enemy though. So if it marks a small enemy, then you still need to attack the boss enemy with Aglaea. So the boss enemy has the mark all the time. So if you get lucky with the technique, always nice. But since you will be always focusing the elite or boss enemy, it doesn't really matter that much who is targeted by the technique. So okay, now we know. When we attack an enemy with Aglaea, they get marked with the Seam Stitch mark. And when the doll attacks that enemy with the mark, we get 1 speed stack for the doll. But we haven't still discussed how do we get the doll on the field to begin with. Well, luckily for us, when you cast Aglaea's ult, it summons the doll. But if the doll was already summoned, then it will restore its HP to 100%. Super nice. So what other way could the doll have been summoned then? Well, luckily the technique also summons the doll, but also Aglaea's skill summons the doll too. And the nice thing is, whenever the doll is summoned, the doll will get 100% action forward, which is always appreciated. So now we know that when we summon the doll, it gets 100% action forward. Okay? The nice thing with Aglaea's skill is, it also gives Aglaea herself an action immediately. So it's basically a free skill usage. So you skill with Aglaea, then you basically attack with her, so you haven't lost any skill points, which is always appreciated. But also one thing I need to mention is that when does a doll attack of Aglaea? When Aglaea does her joint attack, or when the doll gets her turn. And luckily, the doll prioritizes enemies who have a mark. So you basically always get a speed stack for the doll when there's an enemy with a mark on the field. So now we see there are 3 ways to summon Aglaea's doll. That is by casting her technique, her skill, or Aglaea's ultimate. But the nice thing with Aglaea's ultimate is this though. The doll becomes immune to crowd control. So it cannot be imprisoned or like entangled, which is super nice, since that will make our objective of getting the speed stacks to 6 as fast as possible a bit easier. But all of this does doesn't come for free, since when you cast Aglaea's ultimate, one bad thing happens, and that is that we get a countdown in the action bar, as you can see right here, just like with Firefly's ult and Robin's ult. So the countdown starts. Why is this countdown bad for us? Since when it ends, so the countdown thing gets his turn, when that happens, Aglaea's doll will disappear. Why is that bad for us? Well, that means that all the stacks we would have gained are also lost. So that means we need to start getting all these speed stacks from 0 again. Well, actually we need to get them from 1, since if you had 1 or more stacks, then the next time you cast your ultimate, you will start with 1 stack. That's nice, sure, but that's not the main way to generate our stacks. The main way is when the doll does her attack. And when does the doll do its attack? When you do a joint attack with Aglaea, or when the doll gets a turn in the action bar. So our main objective with Aglaea is that we do not want her ult to come to an end, since we need to start doing all of this over again. Get her stacks up of the memo sprite to 6, get her super expensive ultimate up, which costs 350. So we need to get as much energy as possible for Aglaea, so she can cast her ultimate right before the countdown ends. That means, logically, we need to get energy to use her ultimate. But how do we get energy for Aglaea? Well, the most fundamental way we can get energy for Aglaea is by fighting. So when Aglaea fights, she will get energy. What falls under fighting? Well, casting your abilities. Apart from your ultimate, of course. So when you cast Aglaea's skill, she gets energy. When you cast her basic attack or enhanced basic attack, she gets energy. Or when you defeat enemies, you also get extra energy. Or when you get hit. So this means that if we have lots of enemies on the field with consistent enemy spawning, that means we can defeat more enemies. So in the best case scenario, when you cast Aglaea's enhanced basic attack, you kill an enemy the whole time, so you always get extra energy. And in the best case, you won't have any survivability issues, so every time you get hit, you also regenerate some extra energy for Aglaea then, hoping that she gets hit the whole time. It really depends. If they really one-shot you, then of course, that's not something you want to happen. But the best case is, of course, doing lots of abilities, so casting your enhanced basic attack basically in Aglaea's case, and defeating lots of enemies the whole time when you cast her attack. So you can get as much energy as possible before the countdown ends. This is not, of course, the only way for Aglaea to get extra energy, since there are enemies who also regenerate energy for your characters. Like these enemies right here. Since when you reduce these stacks to 0, the character that reduced those stacks to 0 gets some extra energy. And since Aglaea's attack, so her enhanced basic attack, is a joint attack, so it counts as doing 2 attacks, she is more likely to be the character that reduces all these small monster stacks to 0. So Aglaea can have an easier time to get her ult before the countdown ends. So we know, alright, enemies are also a way for us to get some energy. But these new enemies are not the only new enemies. Since you might remember this enemy, when he is happy and gets a turn, he also regenerates some energy to a random ally. So if that ally is Aglaea, voila, you got some extra energy. And of course there are, I think, also some more enemies who give some energy to Aglaea. I think Nikador also gave that. It was in his kit, so it's another ability of him. And maybe some other enemies I cannot think of the top of my head right now. But by knowing the mechanics of the enemies, we can use it to our advantage, as you can see. Okay then, what other ways are there for Aglaea to gain energy then? Well, that is game modes. And what do I mean with game modes? Well, endgame modes like Pure Fiction, Apocalyptic Shadow, MOC, Divergent or Simulate Universe, or whatever there is. But not all Pure Fiction, Apocalyptic Shadow or MOC gives energy. Maybe every Apocalyptic Shadow till now gave energy to us, since when you weakness break the monster of Apocalyptic Shadow, everyone regenerates their energy to max. Super nice for Aglaea. For Pure Fiction, that's not always the case that we get some energy related buffs. But for example, the upcoming MOC is literally made for Aglaea, since every start of the cycle, all allies will regenerate like 20% of their max energy. So that will make it easier for Aglaea to cast her ult before the countdown ends. But of course, we also got allies who can regenerate energy for Aglaea. And those are obviously Sunday, Ho-Ho or Tingyun. We all know that. But there are also allies who can make it easier for Aglaea to do her fighting a bit better. And of course, Ho-Ho with Sunday, Aglaea and Robin is the best team there is. But if you don't have these premium characters, then you need to choose allies who can make the fighting a bit easier for Aglaea then. And those would be characters like, for example, Hanya gives a lot of speed to Aglaea and quite some attack percentage too. Or you can even go for Asta. Basically, allies allow Aglaea to do her fighting better, so Aglaea is now able to defeat as many enemies as possible in the best case scenario, and cast as much abilities as possible to get her ult up faster. And those allies can also, let's say, equip light cones, which can support Aglaea directly by giving her energy. And 2 light cones are, for example, This one, Quit Pro, this light cone gives a random ally a bit of energy at the start of the wearer's turn. So if, for example, Bailey equipped this light cone, then she would give Aglaea a bit of energy, but only if Aglaea didn't have more than 50% energy. So if she had more than 50% energy, then this light coin wouldn't help her, which is a shame. We also got this Battle Pass light coin, and if we equip it, for example, like on Asta, not the best of course, but let's say, then what this light coin does is that at the start of Asta's turn, this light coin will then give the whole team or crit damage, or attack percentage, or energy regeneration rate. And that energy regeneration rate could be useful for Aglaea to get her ult up a bit faster. There's also Ron May's signature light coin, who gives energy to the whole team at the start of every wave, also nice. And some other ways for Aglaea to get some energy is when the doll disappears, but we don't want that to happen to begin with. But if it happens, then it makes casting your ultimate a bit easier. And also, just at the start of the battle, you also get a bit of energy. Well, up to 50% though. Her technique also gives a bit of energy, but I haven't included it since it is not the main way for Aglaea to get her energy. The main way is really by just fighting, so doing lots of attack, defeating lots of enemies consistently, getting hit, luckily, hoping there are no sustain issues. And of course, allies will help you in biting better, so making Aglaea faster, or just literally giving her energy directly, best case, most easiest way. But luckily, we got game modes who can also help Aglaea in getting lots of energy, like Apocalyptic Shadow, when you weakness break the boss, or MOC, like the upcoming MOC, regenerates 20 energy for the whole team at the start of every cycle. And now the current prefix doesn't give any extra energy, but since there are so many enemies spawning the whole time, if you kill enemies every time you attack with Aglaea, and if those enemies attack Aglaea, then she should manage to ult before the countdown ends. So yes, the best team for Aglaea is Aglaea with Huoho, Sunday and Robin. But it is also important for us to know the fundamentals on how to get energy if you don't have these premium characters and cannot ult before the countdown ends. So you can still get your ult up ASAP and start getting the stacks up. And by the way, if you don't know how much speed you should build on Aglaea or Sunday or wherever you're running, just go to Brightwin and there you can see a beautiful overview on what builds you can run. But the most important thing is that you can get all the rewards in the endgame mode before it refreshes. So if you got all the rewards and you didn't manage to ult before the countdown ends, then it doesn't matter. If you got all the rewards either way. But all that really matters is that you're having fun. If you like the Zero Cycle, do it. If you like to have the perfect premium Aglaea team, go for it. Or if you're just satisfied by getting all the rewards, then it's also fine of course, you're the boss. So don't stress too much about it if you cannot manage to ult before the countdown ends, since if you can get all the rewards, you're fine either way. Just do what you like. So I thank you for paying attention and see you the next time. Bye.